is I'm going to go just through a little bit of a explanation to put the context of why we're looking. By the way, hi, Mert. Good morning. He signed in incognito.
He's on mute. There he goes.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm still in the process of getting ready, so I'm listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's working on his hair right now.
We don't want to watch Mert.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just quickly, also to be a test to see what I can share, what we can share, and how we can do this. So I'm gonna start with just let me see if you see a PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
Okay. 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 So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just get into this. So what we've been looking at is this idea of value creation, which the people and the processes and technology. And we also couple this with the improvement method. And this is part of that paper, that we have this kind of continuous improvement that starts with assessing maturity of, these numbers from 1 to 5 for people, process, technology, analyzing, designing a better system, planning improvements, implementing, and then monitoring and impact. So these maturity models can be applied to any of these components, whether it's people, process, or technology. And so what I want to start with is an example of how during the past 3 years we've applied these maturity models to improvement of business processes.
Excuse me, Cello, are you
Yes.
recording? Are you recording?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. So we adopted a maturity model for business processes that its capability maturity model from CMMI, and which is kind of standard. And a maturity model typically describes or defines how well a system could work. So it sets up a range basically from not so good to really amazing. So that is a model that we've adopted that's available and widely accepted. And if we look at it closely, we could say that this initial phase is basically when the knowledge is in people's heads and they can do the job, but then you've got problems when you're doing succession planning. The second one, managed, is when the knowledge is within a team, shared by a team, and it's a little bit better and scalable and repeatable. 3 is when it's documented, which means that you can give somebody, a new hire, a document that says, well, this is how we do it, and people can analyze it. 4th is that, just a second, somebody is in the lobby. Can you them?
I did,
Scott?
yes.
Okay. So, so that we manage quantitatively based on some metrics, and 5 would be sort of continuous improvement, proactive, and so forth. So that was just a model that we've used for business processes. But we also needed to have an assessment method to say where we are on this scale. So the second thing, assessment method shows how well a system actually works, a specific system. So that's the second bubble, analyzed as is system state. So the example that I'm going to use is from City of Grand Rapids. They looked at this process called cross-media electronic reporting rule that was required by US CPA, and these are some of the characteristics of that process, things that they were looking at. So just documenting this process was raised the maturity from level 2 to level 3. So the first thing they did is they developed an as-is model, and they used business process modeling notation that is part of the ISO standards. So a system model is that explains how something works. So this is an example for business process modeling. Engineers have been using these things to describe hydraulics, kinetics, chemistry, and stuff like that. But in this case, our system is processes. It's not a clarifier or a biological reactor or a sewer pipe for hydraulics and so on. So our system model is actually a business process model. So this kind of model actually tells us a lot about what's going on. What are the boundaries? Who's responsible? Do we have these swim lanes? What metrics are used? What triggers it? What artifacts are used? And so forth. What decisions are made? So it tells us a lot about how we do things. So then they went in, Mike Stahl and his team, to analyze. So they used this model in the second step, the system model, to analyze and look at possible improvements, and designed a to be. That's the third step, is to design where would they like to be. And since it's actually a model rather than a flow chart, the has the capability to simulate. So when we simulate, we compare the as to be. So when they did this, they found out that this new business process that they designed leads to significant improvements and reduction in cost, much quicker completion, and so forth. So that's the idea of how a maturity model and a system model help us improving. So system modeling in itself. So when we look at these three bubbles, understanding the behavior of the system, whether it has to do with people or with processes or with technology, really help us understand how to make improvements. So when we document it, we immediately raise the maturity. So after that, then, I'm going to skip. Sorry about that. So I'm going to skip this. So then it's to plan improvements. There was a sound file that I didn't clean up on time. I apologize for that. So then the next step is to implement the improvements. But this means that we have to actually get into change management and learning. So the next phase of the methodology and also of the maturity is monitoring performance based on quantitative things such as metrics and KPIs. And then we complete the system. We have a we use this maturity model to track where we are and so forth. And we can apply it to. So if we look at this, we're actually going to look at this for the people side. So when we look at I forgot to take out the sound file. Sorry about it. So good, no sound files. Sorry about that.
We do not hear the sound file anyway because it's a system sound cello. So we're good.
I know, it's just driving me nuts because it's piping this stuff into my headphones.
Yes, to you, yeah.
Sorry.
Gotcha.
So thank you. So basically what we're going to be working on is on these maturity models that are related to people topic numbers, maturity levels I had just assigned, but we can organize them with respect to processes. So what we're going to be doing in our workshop is the stuff on the left, looking at the way to assess the organizational culture, workforce, change management, to identify an equivalent for assessing system maturity that to something like we've done for the processes in the middle. We will do that on the left. With this other project that I'm engaged in, WRF project, we're looking at the column on the right for the intelligent water system. So these numbers just indicate that for specific processes, we can identify, how well we're, what our maturity is. So let me stop sharing. So that is sort of an introduction of what we're trying to do, but then there's also how are we going to run this workshop? How are we going to go about it? So we're going to use something called Neural, and I'll explain how it works. We worked with this. I'm going to send you a link in the right side of the
So go to conversation.
Yes, give me just a second. If you go to conversation, and I couldn't pre-do it because then only the people who were just a second.
Yeah, so on Teams, just go to conversation
Teams,
and then
go
a
to
link.
conversation, and
Yeah.
I will send you you will see a message from me in 1 second. Give me just 1 second. Okay, just ignore the first one. I had a problem. I'll give you a better one. Give me just a second.
The first one just came.
Ignore the first one. The second one will come in a second. Just do the second one. I had a problem on my keyboard. You will see a link in the chat. So if you click on the link, you should be able to see something that looks like, let me share my screen.
Enter as a visitor. Yeah.
Yeah, enter as a visitor. You don't have to give a name. Yeah, enter as a visitor for sure, and you don't have to give a name. And I'm gonna. Okay,
some of you have done it already.
So let me know if you see. Oops, sorry. If you see something like what I'm sharing right now. Okay, I see a bunch of you are here already. Please don't start moving stuff around. You can move stuff around, but please don't do it until I explain what we're going to do. Is that what you see on these pink and green things are the sticky notes that can be moved around, and they are from our previous phone call when people in the chat were saying, you know, what's a 1, what's really bad, what's a 2, and what's a 5, what is really good. So these are the things that people have suggested. So if you can see, we have two boxes below: organizational maturity and workforce maturity. So we will look at things such, let's say, I'll take this sticky note, and all of you are gonna be able to do the same thing. We can say all decisions are made at the top. Well, that probably has to do with the organization in terms of the control and authority, whether you know, it's top command and control and top down and all that. Or for example, employees fear change. Well, that may be, we can say, is this an aspect of workforce, or is this something that is created by the organization? So we will have a discussion. Does it go here, or does it go here? Where does it go? So that we can understand eventually to construct a maturity that would take these different characteristics that we define: trust and collaborations, values and purpose, control and authority, distribution, accountability and results oriented on the organizational side, and mastery, autonomy and purpose, fairness and inclusion on the workforce side, so that we can have an interactive way to discuss and say where do these things belong. And you will be able, this is not cast in stone. So if you click on the left side of your window, you see the menu here that it says text when you click on it. click on that and you should have something like this appear.
So on the left,
it's on the left under the black. It's under the black. Yeah, it's on second from the top. It's above the whatever you call it, the shapes and stuff. And you should see like a bunch of sticky notes on the left. Let me know if you see that. And I hope that you see that on my screen.
Yes.
Okay, does anybody not see it? Okay, so the idea is going to be that in the workshop that we're preparing for, people will be able to, take a sticky note and put it in wherever, or take a pink one and put it wherever, so that we can collaboratively define we're going to start with just 1 and 5 because it's a lot simpler that, we can always then talk about stuff in between 1 and 5, but so that we can describe what are the characteristics of maturity on level 1 and maturity on level 1 for workforce and then for 5, so that we can then have a framework, just like we had with business processes, for knowing where we are and what we need to do. And then change management will be about what do we need to do to get from A to B. So I'm going to stop now and see if people have comments or suggestions or questions.
Hey, Jello, this is Alice.
Yes.
So I guess my only comment now that I see this is I'm wondering how many people are going to be in the workshop, and it could be kind of chaotic if there's too many people trying to grab the same sticky note and drag it to different locations, and like, how are we going to deal with that?
Well, that's a good point, and we have Scott and I have discussed this, and we are trying to figure out that issue from two viewpoints. One is, do we want to look at the workforce and organization together in the same workshop, or if we want to split the groups and then come back and consolidate things? It is tricky because in one we include more people and we are more, it's more collaborative, but it's a little bit more difficult to manage. In the other one, the challenge is that if we have 25, theoretically, we have 45 people signed up for these people topics. That would be a little bit difficult. So we will have to figure out what I'll have to do first of all is prepare a movie or a document that describes what we're going to be doing in the workshop, what's to click on, so we don't have to go through that kind of explanations and use a lot of time on that during the workshop itself. But I'm open for suggestions. And on one hand, I would like people to be able to just take their own sticky notes and stick them someplace. On the other hand, we don't want it to be too chaotic. So I'm open for suggestions on how to ensure that it's all that we have this fairness and inclusion, on the right side. That we have to keep that in mind.
So Alice, one model we talked about, and it's just one option, but we could divide for part of the meeting. If we had 50 people in the session or 30 people, divide into, a couple groups and collaboratively, work separately in each of the groups and then report back to the overall group, and we could kind of compare and contrast what we came up with and then follow up with a consolidation of some sort, or the individual model. People work with it for a while so that they can contribute, to an overall group conversation, or try to manage it overall depending on, in one group, depending on how many people are attending the workshop.
Somebody also had a question.
Suggestions, people?
Well, I was agreeing with Scott. I was thinking the same thing as to break up in a couple of groups. But I also had a question, or another suggestion, or maybe it's a question, Cello. Is there a way, or is there a method of reaching consensus? You know, what is likely to happen is there'll be a sticky note of interest, and it might, you know, end up in two spots, at least in conversation. Maybe not, the software may not allow that. But that's going to happen. How do we deal with that? Even in groups, it might happen.
There's a voting capability.
Oh, great. Okay.
This Mural.
Okay.
So I don't know if you see it on your. If you go, I don't know if you see it, but I have a voting session button on the top that I can employ. Scott, somebody's waiting. If you can let him in.
Jen is coming into the meeting.
Okay, so there is a way to work out voting. A little bit of a challenge that I have is that it's very difficult for me to test this system on my own. I kind of have to set up a session and with somebody and use their time to test these things. So. I have mostly been able to test things that I can do on my own, but that one I'd have to test. But there's definitely a way for people to vote. So if there's a controversial sticker, we could have a vote where it belongs or it should be tossed. But I haven't really figured out exactly how to do it.
Yeah, there may be some YouTube videos out there that people have used.
Yeah, there are. The trouble with YouTube videos is that there's a lot of them on Mural, but a lot of them, are kind of a little bit slow in terms of, how quickly you can learn. So let me just see something. I see that people are joining, and the people who are joining did not receive the link, so they cannot see what I'm showing.
If you go,
So I'm gonna have to stop sharing. Give me just a second. Stop sharing, and then reintroducing the link to. Give me just a second, to people who just joined, because they will not see the stuff that was shared before. So give me just a second. Okay, give me a second.
So
Okay.
Charles, while you're doing that, could I share something?
Okay.
In regards to Mural, we have individuals at the council who are using Mural and could probably help out with some informational training if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm always happy to get help. However, I also want to let you know that I have. Well, let me share something else with you. If you go, I will give you a link in the chat to a different page. I'll show you what the page is.
You want the overall model? You wanted to.
Yes. So this is the page that you see on my screen now, right? But I sent you a link to a PDF. I'm sorry?
I'm not seeing it on your screen.
Oh, shoot. Sorry.
We are able to click on the link from the chat, and it does come up.
Yes, so this is the file.
There it is. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you for telling me, Scott. So this is the thing that I will put into that presentation to sort of explain how all these things map out. So we went through the introduction to show how maturity model is kind of essential to set up the scales for capabilities and in the beginning. And this diagram explains the background for these, on the organizational and workforce maturity model, where these categories come from. So where does autonomy, mastery, and purpose come in? It comes from this model from Daniel Pink for motivation. So it's related to engagement. Where do these results-oriented accountability, that comes from the Patrick Lencioni, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So there's some, so it's not something that I've sort of specifically invented. I intentionally use the models that are sort of fairly broadly used, and I included fairness and inclusion here, added it to the motivation and how we do it. So basically the idea is that this organization kind of sets up the condition. So that's almost like the field, and this is when you place a seed into the field, how well it's going to be able to, how fertile is the ground, how well, an individual can grow and prosper. So that's definitely an interaction, but a lot of the, it's the organization that does the watering and the plowing or fails to do that. So that's kind of interaction. There's obviously an interaction. If the organization is an equivalent of a parking lot, it sort of doesn't matter, who you put there. They're gonna have trouble thriving. So does this help at all to put things in perspective? It may be a bit much, but I was hoping that we could kind of explain what what we're trying to do overall. And you can see here that we already have a capability maturity model for the business processes that we've used successfully. And on that other project that I'm working on, a research project, I'm going to be doing the same thing on the technology side, on sensing, observing, collecting, analytics, and decision support, so that we can really have a nice ways to see how we're doing with the organization, individuals, processes, insight, and then assessment methods are here, where we showed an assessment method for processes, but we need to also have an assessment method for how the organization is doing, what's the maturity there in the workforce and the processes and technologies, and that will all feed that into this thing called change. So I will make this a little bit more descriptive.
Mert has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Mert.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, Cello. So I had a quick follow-up from what you said earlier during our work, what we will do in our workshop. Yeah. Just to recapture, really, for my own understanding, I'm sure others got it already. So during the workshop, then we are going to sort of apply these models into our respective utilities and experiences, and then sort of see if they apply in a utility environment, see what works, what doesn't work, sort of a take, or is it something else? Are we going to actually be producing something different at the end?
At this step, what we would produce is maturity models that say, okay, these are the characteristics that how we have here, for example. We will produce equivalent to this for these other components. It's something that says these are the characteristics of if you're not doing so well, and these are the characteristics if you're doing really, really well, so that we know how to recognize it.
Yes, so Mert, we had in our previous team meetings here, we had identified these characteristics. Jen, walked us through that. We turned them into these stickies, with one color being a 1 and one color being a 5. And the idea is to place these into a maturity model. And also we had talked about categorizing these. And so what Cello has done is related it back to the, the model that he showed above into those 4 different categories that we can use to, group them. And so we have on workforce, for example, the mastery, autonomy, purpose, and fairness inclusion are kind of clumps or groups of categories that we can place what we've already worked on plus additional characteristics that people would identify. And we've also noticed in the stickies that people produced from the earlier meetings that some of them could be grouped and maybe some of them related to fear, for example, in the workforce, or some were in common that could and maybe call it one thing rather than 4 things. So there's some work like that we could probably accomplish as well.
I just want to emphasize what Scott just said. I hope you can see my screen now. Can you see the mural screen again or no?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm moving some of them. For example, these are the things that people were saying. Fear of sharing ideas, employees fear change. People are afraid if they speak out. So maybe they're related, maybe all voices are not heard. Maybe there's a characteristic that, structure silences voices. And these are, not stuff that Scott or I made up. These are the things that people were saying. So we can start then seeing how to describe what are the potential challenges and problems on one end, and aspirational on the 5, where we would like to be, so that we can zero in on something. Because without a maturity model, without a structure, there's no way to actually start digging into the analysis and diagnosis and treatment until we, being punished for speaking out. So you could take all of these things, and say, well, maybe they have to do with control and authority because it's all top down. Maybe that's why, then you have, these are the things that came from those sessions, from the chats. So maybe departments are siloed. Maybe that's a reflection of the top-down mentality, or so that we have a map of challenges, and on one hand, and the map of aspirational goals on the other side that are specific, very similar to what we've done with business processes before, where we first said, okay, these are our challenges. Is what we're doing, and then we use the system model, which is business process, to see what it was actually doing, and then where do we want to be when we assign the to be, so that we can actually describe it in some way that it's not, that we know what we're dealing with. And these people on the red sticky notes are people that are things that people observe in their work, in their specific situations and organizations. Does that help, Mert?
Yes, thank you so much, Cello, and Scott for the explanations. Thank you.
So at this point in time, we just try to set up the maturity models that are their first deliverable. Then the next one will be, how does an organization figure out where are we on this scale? Where are we? What are the tools we can use to figure out, are we a 1, a 2, or a 5? And so that we can then, same we've done it with the business process, you say, okay, this is what we're doing now, this is as is, what do we want to be? And here it provides us a map that is kind of collaboratively developed. It says, where do we want to be? And then change management will say, okay, what do we need to do with organization, workforce, technology, or processes to improve this? Because maybe it's just a technology problem. Maybe everything else is right. Or maybe it has nothing to do with, you know what I mean?
And then Cello, and I think that it would be good to hear from Zanetta, who is representing, she's one of the team leads. She's on the call from
Yes, I can't
organizational culture.
see.
And then Alice is there from change management also from the change group on the call. And so we're trying to coordinate with these other groups too. And, the change, is once you have done that assessment, then how do you get from where you are to where you want to be is a primary focus of the change group. But maybe we could hear from, Zanetta and Alice, just what their, comments might be. And Zanetta's on, and so is Alice. So if you have something to say, it'd be a good time to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, I think you explained it well. I think the way we're looking at the change management now is how do you then identify, there's a process to change management which can be standardized through all of them, but I think part of what we're going to have to really talk about here to add something to what's already out there is, how is that, if you have a technology change you're trying to make versus a sort of a people change you're trying to make, and does it look the same, and maybe you follow the same steps, but you need to have certain tips and tricks and information about how to do it a little bit differently with a technology versus a people type of change. That's sort of where I'm starting to think about where this group could add some to what's already out there.
That's great. And Zanetta, I see you're off mute now.
No, I was just going to say I agree with all what's been said. I don't have anything more to add. Thank you.
So it aligns with, kind of what you're expecting?
Yes, sir.
So Zonetta made a really great suggestion that I need to write this stuff down. I'm sorry, I got just for about 20 minutes a day, I have sun straight in my face. So I'm just kind of trying to, I gotta get some drapes or something. So, I'm not the top notch when it comes to home improvement. So I'll prepare some materials that people can look at before the workshops to make it go more smoothly, so it's not chaotic. It's a challenge, but if we can overcome this, if we can have this productive exchange of ideas and participation without putting people into a conference room and having a whiteboard and actual physical sticky notes, it'll really help us as we go forward. And to answer Alice's question, it could be chaotic, but sometimes, just to strike the right balance between chaos and exclusion.
Yeah. One, Jen Zukowski's back on the line, and I think we should just acknowledge that one of the important aspects on the people side from a organizational culture, change management, and workforce is recognition is one of those things that we do. Well, it happens that the recognition ceremony for MCES was today, and so that's why Lisa isn't on the line. She's giving priority to that important employee recognition. But Jennifer, you might want to comment on, what we've heard, here. You were not here during that first part. You could have been involved in that mission actually, but, you've been working with us, on this model as well.
Yeah, so my staff, one of my employees actually presented the idea of this virtual employee recognition. So it was important for me to be on the call to support her. I was receiving an award, but to me it was more about recognizing the fact that she presented an idea that went against what we've traditionally done at the council for the last decade, 2 decades. So but yes, employee recognition and engagement is tremendously important. I think we were talking about the maturity model, and that's a good grounding point. I would agree if we were in person, we'd have kind of some rapid sessions. Susan and I were working through that to kind of get some ideas out of people, and I think having these be more working sessions where we can get those ideas on what does workforce look like and how does that tie into the other areas, because there's a lot of overlap. I think that's probably a good direction. And sorry for missing the beginning. So,
but
again,
everyone, we know you're not boastful, Jennifer, but people are wondering what award you got.
I don't know. I've been so, out of the loop. I'm always surprised when I do get those recognition. It was a Keystone Award for some work that I've done with some teams, high performing teams. The great thing is these awards, the program was designed so that everybody could get an award, whether you're an operator, whether you're an engineer, because traditionally there were awards where only a certain group of people would have access to working on teams or access to certain projects or initiatives because their work allows those changing schedules. So this program is just so unique in that we really do see a wide span of our employees. And the award that I got, I think Lisa said in the last year, there were 92 employees that got this high level Keystone Award. So it's just really awesome to see the engagement, people going above and beyond and really thinking outside the box and working to solve challenging problems. And they're doing it in big teams and, meeting and exceeding deadlines and expectations. So there was a Keystone Award. I think I got a couple of them this year, which was pretty cool. They showed up in my mailbox and I was pleasantly surprised because aside from the political junk mail that I always have to throw in my recycling bin as I walk up to my house, I got some cool awards. So
yeah, well, that's great. I see Lisa has joined, and maybe some others, Fred and Parjat and others might want to chime in terms of your feedback or suggestions on what you've seen today. Come on, Fred. Take yourself off mute, and you always have something to say. Mike Sweeney too.
No, I think everything I'm seeing, sounds kind of quiet. It makes sense. I think the earlier discussion on breaking up the groups, I think that makes sense as well. So I think that's let's dive in, and the only way to do it is just kind of get our hands dirty and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Well, you missed out, but it sounds like Lisa, like you had an important employee recognition, event, and of course that supports all the kinds of things that we're talking about on the people groups. So I don't know if you have any comments at this point. We were going to need, I'm sure that Susan was going to chime in and say, do we want to get to kind of next steps and what we should look forward to, between now and the workshop. But Lisa, you might want to chime in.
So, sorry for my late arrival, but I did have a good excuse. And Jan got another award that she didn't talk about. She also earned a green belt. So we have a continuous improvement program, and she went through the rather rigorous program to achieve that. To Jen, so I'm still soaking in everything. I really like visuals, so I was happy to see this shared document. I'm wondering what to bring my attention to be ready for this workshop that you're speaking to. Is there a need to read and look at the Daniel Pink model a little more, or the 5 dysfunction? How can I be having clarity?
Yeah.
So when we start to move the Post-its around, that when we talk mastery, we all have the same definition in mind, and autonomy, because often these things end up with there's some gray area. And so it's not going to be necessarily really black and white where these things land, and that doesn't necessarily a flaw or anything. I just think that we can spend less time maybe debating some things if we can start out with a good grounding of these models that you're referring to. So I know that I could probably Google and find lots of information. I did read the Daniel Pink book at one point, but that's been actually several years. So I would probably want to dust off my recollection of the details on that myself. So if you have something specific, Cello, that you could provide all of us, that maybe is more of the Cliff Notes type
Yes.
version, because I think, time is one thing, but if we can bring the time that we have to our attention to the right things, then I think we can be prepared.
Yes, Zonetta had a very similar comment. I am working on it, and I will have something before we have this workshop. Yeah.
See, I'm throwing this in there, but is it likely that we will have one more meeting of this team before we have the workshop? And if so, that could actually be, a topic that we could cover, at the next team meeting. So we have a common grounding, in the frame, in that framework, and maybe even the 5 dysfunctions of the team framework that we're basing the organizational maturity model on. So if we kind of covered that, then that would be good, homework for people to go read those books or Google them and see the summary, the Cliff Notes version there. But we could cover that and get reactions to that at the next meeting as one suggestion.
Alice has a hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Scott, so you say we probably only have one more meeting before the workshops. I don't believe I have the workshops on my calendar yet. So
that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be a significant amount of time, I think the earlier the better, to make sure people can attend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I'm struggling a little bit, and there was something that you brought up earlier, Alice, is whether we should have a workshop for the organization and then separately organization, for workforce, or if we should have them together. Because it's a balance between getting more input, and these things are so connected, and managing, a remote session with a lot of people on it and stuff. So, or should we have separate and then bring them together? I'm kind of struggling with that.
There's also an issue, and this could be maybe after the workshop or workshops, is that there are people who are participating, on the other improvement initiatives, who aren't attending these team meetings, but they are actually involved in working with the people, with the organizational culture and change management and workforce, and being able to come back and share this with them. It could be through the video, or it could be actually a session where they could attend as well and hear report backs from the group. So those are all, things we could consider, because we have a very large group, and we want to make sure that whether it's through a video or, another opportunity, that they can learn as well.
Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Because overall we have 45 people included on the people topics, quote unquote. They don't always call into meetings, but they're, kind of shown it. And also 45 people on the improvement initiatives. So if it was an in-person thing, it would be one thing, but remotely, I'm trying to figure out how to write the balance. And I'll do what Zonetta and Lisa suggested. Prepare documentation that would help people prepare for the workshop to make it as smooth as possible. But I'm still sort of thinking whether we should have one for workforce, one for organizational, a culture, or whether we should merge them. Any thoughts on that would be appreciated.
Any
So
initial thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to say that a couple of us have put things in the chat that having smaller groups is good, and it's not, to me, it's not necessarily, You have
Thank
one
you.
group of workforce and one group of organizational culture, but even if you have them all together, you break them down into smaller teams. Because, you know, I know myself, if it's like 30 people in the meeting, it's a much bigger hurdle to speak out than if it's like 5.
Yeah.
So what about mixed groups versus having each of the teams do it?
I think there's a lot of overlap of people in the two.
Yeah, there's some overlap. So
Already, yeah.
let me see if we can use the times for these bi-weekly meetings to get everybody to get people in each of these 3 groups kind of primed and on the same page, at least a core number of people. And then we're gonna figure out that I don't know in Microsoft Teams, I'd have to figure out how to do these breakout rooms, but that brings a whole nother level of complexity with different chat sessions and stuff. So if anybody has an idea, we're getting close to you know, to the end of the meeting. I'll stop the recording. And if anybody has